Hi everyone, welcome to All Things Iceland, the place to get the inside scoop on Icelandic nature, history, culture, and language. My name is Jules, and today is special because I am taking what is normally an interview that I do on the All Things Iceland podcast, which is usually audio only, and it's available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts. So I'm taking that interaction I have with my guests on the podcast and bringing it to YouTube, which is so exciting to me because this is something that I feel a lot of people would really get a joy out of, kind of seeing the person that I'm interviewing. I, of course, will continue on with the podcast and audio, but my goal is to have more people that I interview here on the All Things Iceland YouTube channel. And Nichole, who is kind of my first guest kicking off this type of series, is an American who moved to Iceland in the 90s. And she does not hold back about her experience in terms of the difficulties, the opportunities, the advancements in her career, the things that she has endured as a person of foreign origin, the things that she loves about Iceland. There's so much insight. Learning the language. I mean, I am inspired by Nichole, of course, when it comes to so many things, and especially when it comes to learning Icelandic. One thing that is just an amazing accomplishment that she's done is become the first woman of foreign origin in Iceland to be Speaker in Parliament. In addition to that, Nichole is a board member and chairperson of W.O.M.E.N, which is an acronym that stands for Women of Multicultural Ethnicity Network in Iceland. During the interview, you hear me totally flub that because I was trying to find the words for the acronym, but I just think it's really awesome that she is part of this organization is actively helping to support women of foreign origin. So I really think that no matter who you are watching this video, you'll get inspired, you'll learn a lot about Iceland through her eyes, of course. This is her experience. Everybody differs. And on the podcast, I have a variety of people, including Icelanders, people of foreign origin, just so many different types of perspectives that I love to show. And I'm super happy to bring this to you here on YouTube. So if you're interested in seeing more videos like this, definitely make sure to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe and to share, of course, with the individuals that you believe would also like to hear these perspectives from the different fascinating people that live in Iceland. All right, let's get on to the interview. Go the skemmtun! Nichole, thank you so much for sitting down with me to chat today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm excited too. I'm excited for many reasons. Your inspiration and also just your journey to where you are now, and the things that you've done as a foreign woman in Iceland are incredible. But before we get to those highlights, the parts
Okay.
that are that are awesome, so amazing, because your journey in itself, I'm sure, has a lot to it, and so it would be great to hear where you're from and how you ended up in Iceland.
Okay, beginnings. I am from a small town in called Sturgis, Michigan, in the United States.
Okay.
But like all Americans, I had my journeys. There was a little Colorado here, a little Boston there, a little California there. Um, and here, I always make the joke that my current husband, then boyfriend, dragged me here.
Kicking and screaming.
Yeah. If only that were true. No, I was fortunate enough when I lived in Boston to have met a wonderful man who was just as cute as could be, and we hit it off. And when he brought me to Iceland, I was immediately just, wow, this is a thing I want to try out.
Nice. Okay. And what year was it that you ended up coming?
We moved here December of '99 because it was so important to my Icelandic husband, who, if people don't know Icelanders, there's just one thing, they always come home. Regardless of how long they live elsewhere or whatever, there's always this pull and this love back to Iceland. So it was time for him to come home, and he wanted to make it home for the millennium. So we came in December of '99 and made it for the millennium.
And no disasters happened, which is good. So,
No disasters, even though I admit that New Year's Eve is sort of like a major disaster war zone, something I'd never experienced before. And in 20 years, I still kind of, is it over?
yeah.
Um, but it was supposed to be a 2-year stay. 20 years later, here we sit.
Like it's 2 years times 10, no problem. It's no big
Right, right.
deal. Okay, and when you got here, was it easy for you to adjust, or were there any challenges that you faced, any culture shock type of
Oh.
experiences?
It was not at all. I mean, I had visited a couple times before, and when I'd visited, it was just lovely. I came with
Yeah,
my own, money and spent it however I wanted, and didn't have to think about, really making a living or doing anything here. I just,
yeah.
and everyone was so, I was exotic and interesting, and that, and then when I came here and I wanted to be a part, it was not the same thing.
Mm.
I was given a broom and said, "Hey, start over, honey." Well, not in exactly
Wow.
those terms, but the only job I could get was in cleaning. So I'd
Okay.
come with different qualifications, and it was really difficult for me to find my footing. I felt, coming from the United States in a mostly white area and sort of a liberal. I mean, Boston has its conservatism, but there,
Mhm.
I had moved from downtown Boston to Cambridge, so lots of liberalism and whatever.
Mhm.
And here, I felt like an alien. I was like,
Mm.
every time we spoke English in the store, it's like I could hear the wind on people's heads when they turned. Oh, what are
Mm.
they?
Yeah.
Because the whole immigrant phenomena was just sort of kicking off here, and I found it
Ah.
all just really difficult in the first 2 years. It was, I was always looking for that escape route. Are we going now? Are we done? Have we done this? Are we good? Are we?
Wow.
It was and the darkness, to get used to that. I mean, Michigan winters are and Boston winters are renowned, but there's at least daylight. And
Yeah, that's true. Consistent. Like it's not like all of a sudden it's closing in on you and it's dark, right? Like in Iceland,
yeah,
it's so, yeah,
it was just really, really tough.
yeah.
And I just couldn't really find my footing, and that positive me, she kind of disappeared somewhere. She was just all of a
Okay.
sudden negative, and all I could see were challenges and things that weren't the way I knew or understood, which,
Yeah.
then for me, I don't know if it was a prejudice or not. And these wonderful Icelanders that I had met a few times before, they all of a sudden seemed to me to be prejudiced and difficult, and always,
Wow.
it was just it was a little bit of an eye opener. But I guess that's the immigrant experience in the majority of situations. Not too many
Mhm.
people, land in a, what do you want to say, a cotton cloud of loveliness, and they just sort of
Yeah.
transport their current life, and it was just a real eye opener for me.
Yeah. Were there other foreign women or foreigners in general that you were interacting with, or was it mainly like your Icelandic family, and then any other people that maybe you worked around?
In the beginning, because like I said, my only first job was really cleaning. Then it was, me and the mop, and I don't know where the mop
Yeah.
came from. But
Imported from Poland, maybe. Who knows? Like, it's really
yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
random.
But there was an Icelandic woman who worked with cleaning with me,
Yeah.
and she was pretty cool, and we formed a bond. But Icelanders are really involved in their families and their close networks, and I wasn't a part of her network. I was, sort of ad hoc.
Yeah.
She was wonderful when we cleaned, and there were a few times that we interacted outside of, and it was really comforting. The family thing, it was a bit difficult. My mother-in-law did not speak any English. We sat at the table with a dictionary, and I found one in one word, and it was, hand
Wow.
signing things. It was, and then there were cultural things, maybe expectations of me, and that I didn't maybe live up to in the beginning, or because of the communication disconnect. And
Yeah.
but and I was fortunate enough to marry the only son in a family of five very headstrong women.
Woo.
So I had some ground to make up and meet the grade. But so everything that had always come naturally to me just seemed difficult.
Yeah.
and big, and that those first steps in trying to learn the language, it was so difficult because here I was a positive, independent, go-getter, happy, open person who all of a sudden talked like a baby. I
Mhm.
had a very limited vocabulary, a very limited understanding, and everything just seemed tough.
Yeah. I 100% relate to this as
Yeah.
I'm learning it. You're fluent,
Uh,
which is awesome. And that also is part of what inspires me in terms of your journey. Granted, it seems, your hand signs and everything, even though at the time it probably was very hard. I'm guessing it helped shape at least like this persistence and willpower and within you to be like, I'm going to learn this language. So can you talk a little bit about what that was like? Did you go formally to school? Did you, just try to talk with people?
yeah. Well, coming from Michigan, we're all pretty fond of, we all know sink or swim. We're all thrown out in a lake at some point, and
That
so that was
sounds scary.
yeah,
No.
it sounds scary, but no, that was kind of what ended up happening, and it just happened, that I just had to say, I've got to do this. I've got to find a way,
Mm,
and so first it was the dictionaries, and I, at the time I had a cleaning job, and Icelandic courses are expensive. And at the
mhm.
time they were very expensive, and I wasn't paying into a union, and I didn't even know, no one told me I could
Mm,
apply for a grant at a union, even if I had been in a union, to get
yeah.
the cost had reimbursed. Or so it was just an expense that I couldn't do, but it was a necessity. So then I started looking into working in preschool, because I thought,
Okay.
where can I go where people are learning a language, and they speak in simple terms. So, and I have access to, and that's where it was. So I was fortunate enough to get a half a day job in a preschool, where I was basically, a pawn on a chess game. I was just kind of a
Mm,
warm body. I didn't have many responsibilities. I wasn't trusted really
okay.
to be alone with kids, and it was really odd, but I picked up on some things, good words and bad words, and
Yeah.
I
That's a
got to
good,
use trial and error. That was a big
yeah.
way. But when it started to come, and I started to feel confident, and I felt that I was able to get my footing, sort of like mountain climbers. Those first few, I could see there was a hold for me here, for left and
Mhm.
right. I took bigger steps, and conversed with people. A lot of
Yeah.
conversing, it really helps. And as soon as people saw that I was working for it, then I also felt to reach out.
Yeah.
And then I just went back to Michigan, and I applied for university in the field I was working in with early childcare, and I went to school, not to learn specifically Icelandic. Just to be in school, and to
Yeah.
use the language, and to learn a trade, and learn a language that was useful to me.
Right. Which
When
is
we
another
first,
sink or
yeah,
swim type of situation because you've been learning kind of, through experience rather than in a structured situation, and then
yeah.
you jump into a school situation which is very structured but all in Icelandic. So,
Well,
yeah.
this was a sort of a lucky thing. Was a lot of my stuff was in English, so I was
Oh,
able to.
okay. That's good.
So I would sit in a class, and I would be reading it in English, and the teacher would be speaking in Icelandic, and so
Oh,
I was able to work between languages, and it really helped
nice.
me. But the
Okay.
thing of it was is I could have gone to university specifically for Icelandic. A lot of people, that route is always open to us, and it's a really good structure at the university. But I just didn't have time. I had bills to pay.
Mm,
I
yeah,
couldn't be, full day at the university learning Icelandic and trying to have a roof over my head, because it is expensive living here.
exactly. Exactly.
So
One thing you, go ahead.
no, it's okay.
I was
I
gonna say
think I
one
was
thing
just
you
going to
brought up.
repeat.
Yeah, one thing you brought up that I didn't want to miss was you mentioned you didn't know about the union, and so like
Yeah.
just like workers' rights thing. I feel like
Mhm.
that's actually still an issue now when
Yeah.
people come here, and it's crazy to think like 20 years ago this is something you grappled with when you first started working, and then there are plenty of people that come in and still don't know that this certain like privileges, not privileges, but they have access
Right.
to resources. Yes, they're rights. Exactly. That's the word I was looking for. Is they have rights when they're working, and
Hmm.
that part, we'll get in for sure the fact that you work with women of foreign origin. But I think that's an unfortunate thing that is still the case
Yeah.
with foreigners that come in.
Hmm.
Yeah.
how long did it take you, do you feel, to feel like you were fluent in the language? Was it some years?
Oh, years. And even now I still, whoa. Well, that went over my head. It's a
Yeah.
difficult language. It's a living language, just like English. So there's always new things, and they're very protective of it. I mean, right now,
Mhm.
I don't know anybody who watches Iceland from outside, but we have something called a naming committee, which by law make sure that we adhere to laws and how we use the Icelandic language in relation to naming. So,
Mhm.
there are boundaries, and we have all kinds of gatekeepers to make sure we're learning it right and we say things right. And
Mhm.
so there are social etiquettes where you say something wrong and you get corrected, sometimes harshly and sometimes not, which hinder a lot of people from wanting to speak Icelandic, which
Right.
is a huge hindrance for using the language, because I mean that's the whole thing. Language is trial and error from the
Exactly.
get-go. So, yeah, learning it. I'm still working on it, and I still get lots of slag for how well I am or how well I am not in the language. But at this point, can
Ooh.
I swear on your podcast?
Yeah, go for
I just don't give a
it.
fuck anymore. I just don't fuck anymore. And I know that it's important that people like me, who started with zero Icelandic and are somewhere here on the span, that we're out there, that we're speaking, that we're heard, not only for Icelanders to accept us, but also for those people taking their first steps to feel like, whoa, if she did it, I can do it.
Yeah,
And she's
exactly.
someone I can look to because she gets it. She's not going to give me any guff. So,
Right.
and I think that we kind of have to be that way, because we have to be. We're all over the place with learning Icelandic, and a lot of times it's there've been I've landed in situations where I sort of make my own words up, based on different things, and Icelanders like that. They think it's
Mhm.
charming, and they can appreciate the fact that we create new sort of nuances. So.
They do it too, as well, like for fun. So.
Yeah. It kind of makes the whole everything that's difficult and that shyness, and it just
Mhm.
makes it all a little bit easier, because no grown adult wants to feel less because
Right.
of the fact that they haven't been afforded this huge vocabulary that they have access to somewhere else. So,
Right.
like I said,
Exactly.
my philosophy anymore is, sink or swim, go for it, nose to the ground, and just don't give a fuck. It'll come.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Great advice, because it is easy to overthink. I've definitely fallen into that pit before, where I was just
Mm,
trying to get reasons every time for why this is said this way, instead of, why there's exceptions or whatever else. And you literally are just searching for reasons not to learn, in essence, when you get yourself in that. It's just kind of like,
yeah,
well, I don't understand this, so this doesn't make sense, I'm not going to do it. And it's like, just
right.
learn it. You know what I mean? So that part is not that important. It's not like it's going to make or break whether you learn the language. It's just more about a little bit more memorization for some
Exactly.
exception or whatever else. Yeah.
And
It's
I've come full
it's a
circle.
struggle.
I'm correcting myself into saying wrong things now. Like I'll write something, I'm
Oh
like, oh,
no.
that can't be right, and I'll fix it, and someone will read over it, and they'll be like, oh no, it's like that.
You're like, I just had it. So,
So proud of
okay.
myself for having it, but then like, well, why don't you have the confidence to own it?
Yeah, second guessing is tough.
Yeah.
So you went to school and you
Yep.
ended up getting your master's in education. Is that
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Okay. So then after that, what is the road for you like? Because I a little bit about your story,
Yeah.
so it's nice to kind of think, what was your trajectory, at least in your career after that?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, because my trajectory after that was just, I mean, it's like I was on this euphemistical had what's it, what Trump was saying the other day, that we're on a rocket with COVID. I
Which
literally,
the rocket he's talking about is
yeah.
not the same. That's actually the rocket happening. It's like a
uh,
skyrocketing of cases. Not
uh,
like, like.
Exactly. The rocket he's talking about was SpaceX 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sorry, not making light of the situation in the states,
No,
but
no,
wow.
no.
But that's literally what happened. Is I went through. And let's just be honest about this. When I went to I decided to give a stab at this early childhood thing, because I really liked what I was seeing there, and I saw a lot of room to be creative, because I like to be creative. I'm an ideas person, and there you could have an idea and you could run with it, and the
Mm-hmm.
consequences weren't too tough, and it was really fun. So So I thought, well, I'm going to try this thing. And I went for my bachelor's, and I was able to do what was called distance learning, but it's sort of semi-distance learning. So I
Okay.
was working in the preschool at the time, and I was afforded the opportunity to work 100%. So I was
Okay.
cleaning in 3 places. I was working 100% at the preschool, and I was in this semi-distance learning, which was 75%. Yeah.
Intense.
Welcome to immigrant life.
Yeah.
Best experience of my life. Kind of like childbirth. At the time I thought it was hell, but today I wouldn't change it, and I'm so thankful for it, and it was no problem. um, but so I was doing this, and it just everything just seemed to fall. Everything just seemed to fall in place with every step that I finished something. Then I went from being this pawn in the chess game, where I was outside in a what they call a kraftgalley, a snowsuit half the year, watching over kids, to literally being a group leader, where I could do projects with kids and take
Hmm.
story times and do things, to being a lead teacher, to leading sessions and work with the primary school for children moving up into primary school, to being a project manager with diversity and bilingualism. And then
Awesome.
there was an opening for an assistant principal. Was just when I was finishing up my bachelor's and going into my master's. I grabbed it. Had a baby while doing so,
Oh
and
wow. Okay.
yeah, it was like, oh, I got kids now. Okay, let's see how this works. Well, slow down. I quit the cleaning jobs then. But then I go into my master's, and all of a sudden I sort of fall into a space where there's a need for a voice and an understanding around cultural diversity in early childhood
Mm,
education. And I didn't fall into it. I threw myself out there into it, and it opened up a space for me to become a principal.
nice.
And when I stepped into that world, then I saw that it wasn't enough to just be in school administration and do well with school policy and those families and those children there. And I really needed to be a voice and an advocate on the
Mm,
bigger scene, where you need funding and
right.
space to create. So I got involved with a bunch of different developmental projects, and there was a new political swing where there were new people were ready for new ideas, and I just pushed and shoved and had political people into my school to see what we were doing, and it opened up a road to me being invited to take part in politics.
Nice. Yeah, that is amazing. It sounds a bit like a roller coaster ride of many things, different things happening,
It
and
was.
quite exciting as well. Okay.
It,
And in the school, as a
mhm.
principal, were you seeing a lot more multicultural children, meaning like kids who were either with parents that had mixed backgrounds or maybe coming completely from different countries altogether, both parents?
At one time at the school, because I always kept track, and the thing of it is I worked in a school who had, I don't know if it still does have, as I'm not there
Hmm.
anymore, but I think it does. At the time I was there, it had about 84% children of a multi-ethnic background.
Wow.
But that's not the only we also had a very diverse socioeconomic background.
Mm,
Unemployment
okay.
at the time was at its highest, and that was still, I think, only around, I don't even think it was as high as 8%, but it was when we were going through
Ooh.
our last
So,
recession.
yeah.
It was over 27% in our school. And the different reasons for those,
Whoa.
for people to be not in the workforce, they were just as diverse. Single young moms, people who were on disability pays,
Yeah.
people who chose to stay home, people who were in a different educational things, people who had literally just lost their job. So it's a
Yeah.
really diverse set of needs around this school. A lot of issues with, like I said, social economic. We had wealthy parents and parents who were just scraping by. So it
Mm,
was a real lesson in community development through
right.
education. It was great. I loved it.
Yeah. That's amazing. Did you face any challenges in that job as principal? Because now you're, head of the school, and there's, I'm sure, a lot of
Yeah.
expectations from parents and teachers.
The biggest problem that I didn't even realize that I faced,
Okay.
it was prejudice.
Ooh, okay. How so?
And at the time, I didn't, I just went out there, and I was just, I was going to do everything I could to do things right. I had
Mhm.
no idea what I was doing, just literally, flying blind. It's kind
Figuring
of
out
like
as you go.
I was given the keys to the castle, but no instructions.
Yeah.
Call up other principals. Hey, how do I? So it was just I jumped in and I went at it, but then I realized that being bold, doing the right thing, and thinking
Mhm.
about things that were lasting really, really mattered. And that's what I did. Just went out and created initiatives, raised my voice, and with time, I started to see that I was getting resistance and
Mm.
back talks and things like. And I didn't really understand the resistance. I thought it was just because I was trying to do things new and, trying to
Mm.
prove myself and trying to be this voice. Just trying too many things. But then when I realized later, it had to do with me.
Okay. As a
I was,
foreigner.
yeah, I was not
Okay.
traditional. I had employees
Mm.
who were not satisfied with the fact that I was younger, I was foreign, and I had these new
Um,
ideas, and I was getting resistance there. I had resistance from some parents because they had different expectations regarding what should be happening in that school.
okay.
I got resistance, not so much from other principals, more sort of what she thinks she's doing, which I would hear from the side.
Mm.
And little things like, when I try new things, for example, I decided that my employees should present themselves in their little bios on the website.
Okay.
And I got a phone call. I will not say from what organization or what it was, but from someone who literally was someone that I should have looked to for inspiration, direction, and maybe, over me, called me and said I needed to fix my website and that the wording on it wasn't good enough, and they were making a direct link to my Icelandic background, when the truth of the matter is the wording came from my own employees who were Icelandic, many of them, but maybe had that socioeconomic background, learning disabilities or whatever. And I just
Wow.
yeah, and that's just one
Yeah.
example, but there were other things. So
Okay.
prejudice was
Yeah.
was a thing that I kind of ignored it. I guess I thought that some of the prejudices that I had faced, that they were just stupid. But
Mhm.
then other ones were just non-founded, and they're just things that I didn't expect because I just never thought of myself as different from anyone else.
Yeah. Okay. This
How
is
weird is that?
yeah. I mean, and especially like I think coming from the U.S. in certain areas of the U.S. too, that can be the case. And
Mhm.
so when you come to a place that's so insular, obviously it could be a culture shock that way. But in
Yeah.
this case, it's like you're in the upper echelons of education, so which
Mhm.
is I'm sure a different beast,
Yeah.
than the previous experiences that you had, or maybe other people have had. So just in that position of power, I think also comes with potentially people having criticism, harsh
Mhm.
criticism, because it's like the children, the teachers, like you're representing everybody and making decisions
Yeah.
for everybody. Whether it's unfounded or not is a totally different discussion.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's just, I guess, in essence, part of the job. It's just
Yeah.
unfortunate to feel like being a foreigner in this case was maybe considered negative by some
Yeah.
people.
And I've
Yeah.
gotten that in everything. When I went into
Yeah.
politics, and the first position in politics that I took was as a community leader. Here, I chaired the community, and I love the neighborhood I live in. I love all the possibilities that are here. It's called Breiðholt, and it's culturally and socially. It's just a really diverse, wonderful community. And I got a lot of slack for being foreigner. Maybe I shouldn't be
Mm.
in that position. When I was in Parliament, we don't want you on our Parliament. Go home, Yankee. I was called a Trump
Wow.
whore, which
Ooh.
deeply, deeply, deeply insulted me.
Yeah. And
But
this
so
was
there, yeah,
when you were serving as speaker in
yeah,
Parliament, or this was just
yeah,
okay, because we're gonna definitely get to that. But
yeah, yeah,
whoa, I didn't. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
yeah,
Okay. Oof. Just like I'm trying to I feel like I'm trying to recover. But it's like this. And so, but these were coming from people that were constituents, meaning like
hmm
they're part of the general public.
yeah.
Inside of Parliament, were they saying these things?
No, not that I know
Okay.
of. No, 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 no.
Okay.
Inside of Parliament, uh, first, Parliament as an institution and the people that work there and whatever, I have never experienced integration like I did there. The way that they took me in, and they understood my lack of maybe understanding, not only for tradition, but just Icelandic politics and things
Yeah.
like that. They were really there, really. And when I left, I have to admit that I was sad. I still left them. I took them candy and
Oh.
and went and had picture taken with everyone. I just really and I could look to them for so many things. And they were wonderful. And other politicians, no one treated me disrespectfully there, but
Mm.
I mean, I never experienced another parliamentarian, coming, but I did realize that were some that were tilbun, sorry, Icelandic, were,
Yeah, I've heard you even say like yes now. You got like your Icelandic filler words and
yeah,
everything coming out.
yeah, that's right. They were prepared to sort of play with me, play with
Mm.
my inexperience, my willingness, my lack of knowledge. There were people there who were willing to sort of manipulate the fact that I was an outsider, that I didn't have a footing in the history of their parties
Mhm.
or all of the legislation, and sort of that, being 5 or 10 steps behind, that you wanted to use that to their advantage.
Yeah.
um,
Okay. But they were doing this in a positive way, or meaning like
just how politics are, just
yeah.
in a
Okay.
political way, but no one blatantly treated me poorly. And I think
Okay.
some of them, they really learned a lot from working with me, because maybe they hadn't worked with a lot of foreigners, and the knowledge that I brought with me, that I could feel that, maybe I was good for them.
Yeah. And on that topic of you being in Parliament, we might as well just
Yeah.
jump into that because this is the part where I learned at least a bit about you, and then specifically with your associations with women
Hmm.
of foreign origin and work that you've been doing in your community. But in terms of Parliament, so you've made history as the first generation immigrants of
Hmm.
who was a member of the parliamentarian. Wow, got to
Yeah,
get that out there.
I know.
It's like
It's a big
it
one.
rolls off the tongue so well, and
Uh,
as well as the first woman of foreign origin speaker in
mhm.
Parliament. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
So those are like trailblazing things that you've done, and I would assume, like you mentioned, there's like the inexperience of obviously if no one's been in this position before you, right?
Right.
So there's like a lot to learn, and then also the reactions that you're getting, how the public is responding, how your fellow members of parliament are responding. Just if you could go a bit into that journey and like any moments or like the exciting parts about it, the challenging parts.
Hmm. Yeah, a challenge. Again, it was sort of flying blind. Exciting was the fact that, like I mentioned, as an institution, they took really good care of me. For example, with the speaker,
Mm,
just the idea, you sit in that chair and you are running Parliament essentially.
yeah, pretty cool.
It's steeped in tradition and rules and a lot of things that you have to understand. And they really took a lot of time. We called it. I got to test drive the seat a few times, and and gave me sort of helper sheets, so I had the right language and
Nice.
context. And they gave me a longer time to sort of integrate into it, while other parliamentarians, even though they were new to the position as well, they were, thrown right into it. They'd taken the seat, and they really took good care of me. And I was also chair of the welfare committee, which,
Mm,
and I'd had experience for chair of Braithholt, but I knew everything that was going there, and I worked really closely with our community manager. So it wasn't really a thing. But then the
yeah.
lawyer who works with you, she took my hand and guided me through it, and just took care of everything. I found out later that when I spoke in Parliament, like I said, I got to a point where I just said what I said, and I knew there were mistakes, because of the fact that all of your speeches are written and kept in the archives and on the web and are always
Mm,
accessible. That I found out later that the person who was doing the writing respected so much the work that I put into everything, that put a little bit more extra effort into making sure that I looked good in the records forever.
Oh,
So,
awesome. That is
yeah,
so
which was
awesome.
super endearing.
Yeah.
But when we go back to the whole thing with letting me be who I am,
Yeah.
but just the fact that they understood that and they understood the institution. Um, Challenging again, just not knowing everything, and I'm a very open person, as you can see. The words just fly from me. It took a while for me to understand where I needed to put my guards up and where I needed to protect myself
Mm.
from lobbyism that I just didn't understand, and
Mhm.
so that was a real challenge.
Yeah. And I read an article about you having kind of an emotional moment once,
Mm,
and that was strangely reacted to, meaning like
yeah.
public and all that. So if it's okay with you to kind of talk a little bit about that moment and why that was kind of, I guess, important for you to share what you were feeling at that time.
Yeah. So it was at the end of each session, we have a day. It's where we have our speeches are. It's kind of like the State of the Union, I guess would be
Okay.
the
Yeah.
equivalent. So it was State of the Union. It's nationally televised. First time, I mean, Parliament is always, online, like C-SPAN, and people. It's
Mhm.
there. It's some people watch it, and we're really good at letting me know they needed to have my sessions text set because they didn't understand anything I said, and which is baloney. But I never really thought a lot about it because sometimes you're in Parliament, you're just talking to yourself, or there's one parliamentarian and you're nodding to them and you're having a one-way conversation. But so this was a big day, and everyone, dresses up, and the Parliament is set up with flowers, and I was told that it was sort of a wrap up, that we needed to say,
Mm.
sort of, what we'd worked on in the year, and sort of, to put something on it for your party, for you, for
Mhm.
the nation. And here I am, the first woman of foreign origin. And I had been through all kinds of things. I mean, there was a period where I disappeared from Facebook because I just didn't want any more of the creepy trolls. I didn't
Mm.
appreciate it. My priest and my mother both told me once that, you can shut the door. Shut the door. You
True.
can shut the door to the noise if you've got a job to do, and it gets in the way. So, there was a lot of things, and I decided to sort of write about the experience and talk to my direct constituents, which I believe to be people of foreign origin. That they
Mhm.
needed to understand, and not just them, but other Icelanders really need to look at it for what I was. I wasn't just there as a punching bag. I was
Right.
there as a testament to what can be done in this country and what we need to be open for
Mm.
allowing people to do. So it was a kind of a personal speech, less than me going out with some political rhetoric. And I'd
Right.
spoken about, because I realized that my way to get further was to embrace the Icelandic education system, and that we needed to realize that that was the key to our society continuing to develop, and accepting all this diversity, and just, Iceland would be a better place if we could just make our education system open to everybody.
Right.
And
Yeah.
anyways, I mean, I don't remember all of the exact words, but I get up there in front of the camera and I look, and it's not the normal news camera. It looks bigger, and there's this light, and it's like this, and I'm like, okay, and I'm all super makeuped, like my son says, with like a clown, and
Oh.
I've got this rocking dress on because I want people to, say, yeah, that's our girl. uh, and I look down, and I realize at the moment, this is huge. This is
Yeah.
huge, not just for me, but for Iceland. And I get that little thing in my throat, and I start out the roads, and I'm like, God, I can't fail. And I shed
Yeah.
a couple of tears, and I stumble on my first words. And then I look up again, I take a deep breath, and I look at my parliamentarians, and there are a couple of them, and I saw they had the same thing.
Yeah.
They got it.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, let's do this. And I did
Yeah.
it. And when I get home, first thing I see is on one of the papers, they spoke out of it like, hey, yeah, go on the news and talk about yourself and cry, shed a couple of tears. It was taken very negatively in some of the media, and the way that
Yeah.
the comments came and the things like that. But what happened in the room, in the
Mhm.
parliament, when the camera turned off, everyone stood up, they clapped,
Mm.
I was embraced, and people were like, yeah, this is what we want for our country. So I thought, yeah, great, great. This is going to be a great next session.
Yeah, that's
And
intense.
yeah, what ended up happening though is session ended. There was a huge, and people can look at and see, back in context what happened. But our party broke the majority. We went back out and voted, and I was voted out by an overwhelming majority. And there are no foreigners in our current parliament.
Wow.
And immigration laws are not being reformed. Not enough is being done. So that moment that I had where I felt like, okay, this is great. We're going to do things. These people, they get it. The people I work with were, and my idea was, to continue to do a lot more for foreigners. And like I said, we no longer are represented in Parliament,
Right.
and I don't see a lot of legislation that's opening up to do a lot more for us.
Yeah, even though the percentage of foreigners is growing in Iceland continuously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Growing and hopefully not stalwarting, because you can't have
Right.
that. You can't have a pop. We're 14% now, and it's even, I think it goes up to 16% when you look at second generation.
Mhm.
You can't
Yeah.
have it like that. Numbers say that immigrants are the highest population not to make it through what would be step beyond high school here to 18,
Ooh.
20.
Yeah, yeah.
Highest dropout rates, highest rates of unemployment now because of this newest recession due to COVID. We represent the highest echelons in the lower paying jobs. We have the
Mm.
lowest opportunity for upward mobility. We're not represented in management or specialists, so things got to change.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that on top of the fact that you're a foreigner and have been in this position, being a woman who showed emotion came into play? Like, is that something that you heard in
Oh,
the
without
news
a
at
doubt.
all? Yeah.
Without a doubt. The thing is at the time that I'm represented in Parliament, there's another foreigner who was also Pavel. He was of Polish origin, and he moved here with his family when he was young. So he sort of grew up through school. He had a presence. He is a present in a conservative party, and
Mhm.
people knew who he was, and he was a lot more accepted. And when I look back, and people talked about it, even Pavel himself talked about it, that the slack and the trolling and the criticism that I got compared to him was just
Mhm.
it was obvious. It was right there. It was in your face. So I don't doubt for a moment that I was it's because I was a woman,
Mhm.
because I dared to speak as a woman, and yeah, that I was a foreigner. The only thing that could have given anyone any more space would have been if I was a woman of color.
Mhm.
And I know I've been warned not to talk about that, but there are times that I wish I would have been, because then I just would have been a little bit more, hey, look at me and think about it, reflect about where we're headed, because none of
Yeah.
this shit matters. None of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in terms of talking more about this regarding women of foreign origin, you
Yeah.
are involved as a board member, chairperson of the Women, which is the acronym for Women of Multi-Ethnic,
Like network.
Multicultural
Something.
Ethnicity Network. Yeah, there you go. I always have to look at my notes and be like, yes, because
It's
it's a
a
lot, but
it's
it's
right.
an acronym. Women. It spells out the acronym
Women.
spells out
Yeah.
women. Yeah, which is great. And
Yeah.
that organization, what is the purpose of it? Is it, helping, supporting women of foreign origin here? Like, what happens, and why is that an
Right.
important thing for you to be involved in?
Well, we have two primary roles. One is advocacy, which is done through formal channels, like when legislation comes out, we write referrals or bring attention to what needs to be, how we need to be represented in that legislation, and we put our noses into things at ministries and municipality levels. And the other thing is through support, and support is in the form of networking. And
Mhm.
I guess the third thing that we found that we have to do better on, and we have to, because just institutions in general don't do well enough, and that is the diversion, or the getting information out there, letting people
Mm.
know. Like I mentioned, I didn't know I had a right to a union. Even when I had a union, I didn't know what my union fees were going for, what rights I had. I was
Mhm.
4 years paying in a union before I knew that I could get money to pay back for that tuition. So I didn't really need to be working 3 cleaning jobs while I was
Yeah,
in school, or that,
exactly.
I had rights. There's all kinds of rights that, I mean, in Iceland, we have an amazing union network that in
Yes.
the United States we don't even have. And
No.
people just
Not for
don't know about
everybody.
these things.
There are just
No.
certain positions, like teachers, for instance, or other industries that have it, but not everybody. And that was a shocker to me as well, coming here and
Hmm.
being like, oh, everybody can be, that's
That's right.
amazing.
And you could
So yeah,
choose. You could choose.
yeah.
And those rights, they're there, and you're supposed to have a representative. And I mean, there's
Mhm.
just, and there's so much stuff that, because the thing about it is you come from a country where you have an understanding. I think that
Mhm.
we can agree that no matter where you come from, you don't have a complete understanding.
Right.
Things are vast. You don't know about your healthcare system necessarily until you have to use it.
Right. Exactly.
And then you go to somewhere else where they have a completely different one, where maybe you have more rights and you just don't think to ask about it. So
Mhm.
that's something that we're working on, that we do, and we're working on, is informing women of their rights and responsibilities, because a lot of those rights don't open up until you've fulfilled certain responsibilities.
Right. Yeah.
um, and then again, the advocacy, it's so important. And right now we just released another questionnaire. We're trying to look specifically, because of this COVID thing, it's hit
Mhm.
hard on the immigrant population, and we need to know, where is it, where are you hit hard, and what can we do, and what can we force other people to understand needs to be done.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
that whole networking thing, because it's super easy to isolate here. And
Mhm.
one of our advocacy things was rolling out Me Too in
Mhm.
our specific voices, because our situations were, what do you want to say, tainted and colored by the discrimination and exclusion that women of foreign origin have experienced. It made
Mhm.
them much more vulnerable.
Right.
So then, working on these kind of things, where we bring out the voices, and put them in the box they need to be in.
Mhm.
Because here in Iceland we talk about gender equality and everything for women. We need a gender and ethnicity equality
Mhm.
bill. We really do. We need something that, a policy that shows up everywhere.
Yeah.
We need a little
Absolutely.
affirmative action is what we need. Regardless of
Yeah.
what you think about it, it gets the ball rolling, and it gets people thinking.
Mhm. Well, I mean, just even a part of that when it comes to the language,
Hmm.
just I was informed by another person who lives in Sweden who immigrated there about how the classes in Swedish are free for
Yep.
people who are foreigners. So
Hmm.
even that barrier, because now there are a lot of people who are affected by COVID, meaning they're not working, and they want to improve their skills. So Icelanders are going back to school, and foreigners as well, and some of them are
Hmm.
specifically going to language school so that they can then have the language. So, if they need to work in some other industry or whatever else, they can be more qualified or feel like they're more,
Hmm.
of a candidate, a qualifiable candidate for a job, because the language is such a barrier for so many individuals. And
Right.
then the perception of who, so this kind of jumps a bit into the Diavaf article that I saw, where you were speaking out about an advertisement that Landsbygli, the National
Mm.
Hospital, put out. And they had an advertisement specifically for someone who was working in the kitchen, and it was a black woman wearing a hairnet and looking very happy. I mean, we both know
Yeah,
this
she's always
woman, and
happy. She's a
she
wonderful woman.
she is a ball of sunshine to me. Like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah,
so,
she is.
lovely individual. And then you have, for nurses, it's a group of white women who are, smiling as well. And
Mhm.
in terms of Iceland, yes, you can find both, but there's a diversity that's missing, and is also an unconscious bias in this ad. So
Mhm.
just could you talk a bit about having to address that in what the response was?
Yeah. So it was an interesting thing, because number one, we talk about our girlfriend that was there, not at all ashamed of her job.
No, yeah.
She just thought it was a crappy picture at
And no
first when
reason
she
to be
saw it.
ashamed as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Even though she always looks great. Her name is Ino,
Yeah,
by the
and
way,
no
if anyone
one
wants
asked her
to.
for it. And
Yeah.
then when she looked at it and she put it together, she's like, "Well, wait a minute. What message are they sending?" And that's the thing. And
Mhm.
like I mentioned earlier, immigration has not been a long phenomena here. It's not something that's really well thought out, and it's something people don't think about. If we roll it back just a little bit to language, in
Yeah.
job applications, when you apply for a job, it will say Icelandic skills appreciated,
Mhm.
basically. And then the way they define it is basically it allows for the interviewee to decide how good they think your Icelandic skills are. We don't have it based on anything. So, you can go but it's a requirement. I mean, there are some jobs you
Mhm.
have to speak Icelandic.
Right.
And it's a requirement that living here you've got to speak Icelandic, but there's no yin to the yang.
Right.
You have to sort of go out and get your Icelandic skills, but it's required for you to have them. You mentioned Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Germany, Belgium, all of these places. They have incentives and programs, and they have a scaling system.
Mm.
Germany, of course, they're so efficient where if you have C1 skills or whatever, I don't know all the levels, but they're looking at it here. But if you meet a certain criteria, then you are what they say is it efficient enough to get into this kind of program or this type of job on the
Mm.
job market. If you get into this one, then you can be here and it qualifies. So then when you fill out your job skills, you can say, just like you can with anything, you can say, I have a master's degree in this. You can say,
Mhm.
I have Icelandic skills that test in here. So there's
Right.
no objectification about your skills. So that goes into that. And then when we get into the whole advertising and the whole, you know, precedent setting thing, when we went to the hospital to discuss this, there was one woman who took the initiative to answer our, what do you want to say, complaint. And
Mhm.
she said, well, I put the advertisement together and I just, I didn't realize it. And I
Mhm.
had said, well, I didn't say honey, but I said, you need to realize that. I mean, McDonald's has had, diverse advertisements for and a diversity policy since I was, 10 years old, 37 years or something like that. And she said, we don't have anyone who's looking at these things, but we do
Right.
have in Iceland anti-discrimination legislation where we have a right to say, I was discriminated against in the job hiring process.
Mm.
And you can do it according to ethnicity. You can do it according to religion. You cannot do it according to language, but you can tie that into the ethnicity. You can if
Interesting.
you have a good lawyer, but you
Mhm.
can take this to you can make it to the equality. There's like an equality institute, and I guess
Okay.
that's what you'd call it. You can make your complaint there. They'll look over it. They'll go through the hiring thing, and the other is discrimination in public. Say they would say that I couldn't come into a restaurant because I don't speak good enough Icelandic. Then you can. I mean,
Yeah.
they have this, but it's most people are not on both sides of the fence. They're not well enough informed about this legislation. So they
Right.
don't know that in my advertisement, I've got to be careful not to objectify and not to discriminate in how I do this.
Right.
And then the people who are being discriminated against, they don't know enough about these laws and their rights to do this.
Right. Yeah, and for the most part, as a person who is from another place, you just want to fit in, and complaining can come across, especially if
Yes.
it's constructive criticism. I mean, if you're just nitpicking, that's another story. But
Mhm,
actually complaining about something that deeply is either illegal or just emotionally
mhm.
hurtful, whatever it is, that can come across as being, non-compliant or not fitting into the society, because now people might have their own ideas about who you are, and if they've already have preconceived notions about
Right.
where you're like where what people are like where you're from. There's a
Mhm.
lot of different things you juggle in your mind, when you look different, when you sound different, and all these different variables.
Yeah, and Iceland is, we're only what, 340 something thousand, or I don't know if it's 360. I don't know where we
Yeah,
are
I think
right
it's,
now in
it's
the
over
span.
360,000. Yeah, it's
Okay.
growing like crazy.
Um, yeah, yeah, it is. But the thing of it is, we are, we have big time ideas. We are our own nation, right?
Yeah.
And we have all of the standards, but just the same, the philosophy, it's not what you know, it's who you know, is big time.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
being the person who speaks out it's not an easy course to take.
Right.
Um, and when it comes to, I mean, I was just in a meeting this week with the Multicultural and a council where we spoke to a victim from a horrible fire. And in this
Mhm.
fire, there were immigrants who were living in illegal housing.
Investify. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Illegal housing, and I mean, there were just so many things that were wrong, but
Mhm.
people knew it. And people who were living there were living in, they were also dealing with their rights being infringed upon on the job market,
Wow.
in the housing market. And people didn't dare to speak up because they were afraid they would lose their job or they would lose their
Yeah.
housing. And losing those two things are, I mean, it's a human rights issue.
Yeah.
But we find it that it's really really difficult. And when people don't have, if we go back to that support network thing, where people feel isolated, they don't
Mhm.
have anyone who's advocating for them, either within institutions or unions or things like that, it just doesn't happen. And
Right.
we found with Me Too, for example, there were women who were living in conditions that allowed them to be abused, either physically,
Mm.
sexually, or financially,
Yeah,
because
that's
their
awful.
livelihood depended on it, because it's the
Right.
only place they had to live. That was the only person they knew in the country.
Yeah.
And I know that that's not indicative of Iceland.
Right.
It is something that is part, it goes on in the world, but it's something that here in Iceland we could easily eradicate, because we have, all sorts of support networks that are bound into our rights and in the
Mhm.
systems that we have in our welfare, health, and tax
Yeah.
systems, even.
Yeah. Exactly. And that kind of brings an interesting point when we were talking about this house fire, because once this happened and people were reacting to it, there, you heard people saying like, oh yeah, known about this house for years, it's awful. And it's like, it's, you think about it and you're like, well, that's terrible that everyone's known, or so many people have known for years, and yet it's been allowed
Hmm.
to go on like this. And then the fact that some people, specifically from Eastern European countries, are being recruited to come here, and their housing is connected to their job contracts. So if you lose your job, if you were to complain about your housing and you lost your job, you could, lose your housing as well. So now you're in a bind that you just feel like you have to, put up with abuse from your employer
Exactly.
or the agency that connected you to this employer.
Yeah. And it's just really sad to see.
Yeah.
And and uh, and it just has to do with, I mean, we need more organizations like ours at Women, where we, do our best to make sure people understand that they have rights and that there are people they can look to for support.
Right, absolutely. And it's great that this exists. And you mentioned about the support piece, I think kind of jumping into a little bit regarding the experience of coming into Iceland, because so many people I hear from are like, I want to move to Iceland,
Yeah.
and they don't have a connection to Iceland, meaning they don't know, they're not married to an Icelander or dating one, or maybe know any Icelandic people at all, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're super excited about coming, and for many, the reality hits when you realize that Icelanders can be very friendly, and a lot of the
Mm,
times they are, but they can be very closed, meaning holidays are for
yeah.
family, like their
Yeah.
friend groups. So
Yeah.
I'd love for you to talk a bit about that, because you said when you came up, there weren't even that many foreigners. And
Yeah.
even to this day, though, it kind of continues with a very similar attitude towards like who
Yeah.
gets let in.
It definitely, there's definitely a whole clique mentality here, and it's not something that people do purposely or
No,
intentionally. It's just ingrained. It's one of those, when we talk about cultures in Iceland, there are lots of things that I love about them, and they're very endearing. And while this is endearing, the strengths and the ties. I mean, wow, if I still had my best friend from when I was 6 years old, that would be so cool. That's such a fairy tale thing, right? I mean, coming from a place like America where we just, but here it can be very exclusive, and it can be very hard for you to get into a clique. And we have something called kunningjar. I have all kinds of kunningjar in Iceland, but I think really, really good friends. They fit under these 10 fingers, and the
mhm,
majority of them are foreigners. Because
yeah.
they're in the same situations. But they'll have, they have friendships from when they're in primary school, and
Mhm.
they're so loyal, to the point of where it can be annoying. uh, and
Yeah,
family first.
absolutely.
So you
Yeah.
come in, and you're the outsider, and you maybe think, oh, I want to have an American Christmas. Yeah, you're doing it on your own.
Well, you could do it on the 25th, because not as many
Yeah.
people care about the 25th. The 24th is the golden
Right.
day where everyone is like gets dressed up, and 6 o'clock sitting for dinner, has their, all this stuff. I talked about this
Yeah.
with someone the other day, and they're like, I love celebrating it the American way on the 25th. I was like, but the 24th, you have to be with your Icelandic family. And they're like, yeah. That's like, that
And
day's not for
dressed to the
you.
nines.
Yes.
That was the first thing. I was like, whoa, I have to have a ball gown. No, no.
Not
No,
exactly,
but
but I
it's
mean, pretty dressed up. So.
yeah, it is, and it can be, and when you come in and you're especially Americans, because a lot of people say, oh, they're so bubbly, they're so open, but Icelanders, from the very beginning of me knowing Icelanders, I've heard people say that Americans can be false because we're always like, hi, how
Uh,
you doing? I mean, I go to the grocery store in Michigan. I'm at the point where I'm so Icelandic that I go to the grocery store in Michigan, and the woman starts to talk to me about my kids, and I'm like, what's your problem? What's
yeah.
you know?
It's like, it's none of my business, lady.
Drop into different strokes. What you talking about? Yeah, no. But but people say, but it's a different thing. It is. I
Yeah.
mean, I just spent 6 months in California, getting to know some people, and I was kind of like, ugh. But then my birthday was 2 days ago, and they were sending me messages, and they were,
Oh,
and these are people that I just met for a tiny bit, and when I was there they were, my family, and that is something that, Americans, when they show up with their basket of goods, they mean it. They do mean, mi
yeah.
casa es su casa. It's but here it's sort of, you've got to go the length to make it into that level
Mhm.
where you can, but when you do make it in and
Mhm.
you do get accepted, that door is open.
Yeah. Very true. It's
It's just
just
a lot of
not
work.
open. Yeah, it's definitely not open to everybody initially. And in fact, it's not open to everybody. Period. I should
Mhm.
say, because I don't want to give people a false impression. Um, and also, when you're married into a family, you're initiated differently, of course, because now
Yeah.
it's like this is someone that becomes family. So now you're getting to kind of interact and learn, dive into the deep end still, but it's a totally different thing of not even being having access to the pool.
Right. And here's the thing is the point of the fierceness and the closeness, there's
Hmm.
something that happens that they don't even realize. It happens subconsciously, but it does. There's exclusion that's tied into it. And not because they
Hmm.
want to keep you out, but I've
Hmm.
been, just for example, I've been to like great cocktail parties or dinner parties or whatever, where we're, doing our thing. But then because they have this association that's a lifelong thing, or they've all been to the same sports club forever. They start to
Yeah.
talk about something that you have no knowledge of, and no one stops to say, "Oh, that's right. You don't know about Kitty Gully who peed his pants in the seventh grade," and explain you.
But
So
we're all everyone at
yeah,
the party had been there, right? So
yeah.
it's like,
Everything, there are inside jokes inside of inside jokes
yeah.
inside of, and they always come up, and they have to do with all kinds of things. So it's like, I mean, so many times that we'll be talking about something, and I'll be like, yeah, and popping jokes and feeling good, and then all of a sudden I'm out here with my red wine glass all alone.
Yeah.
And it's a thing. It's because they know, or they talk about maybe Njál's saga or something like this, that
Yeah.
everybody had to read in the third grade. I mean, and because Iceland is small, and because of course everyone does, I mean, you and I can speak about Abraham Lincoln, the world knows. So
Right.
it's, people can take part at a certain depth in the conversation, or be like, oh yeah, I know that guy, he wore a hat, even though you
Mhm.
don't know the same context, but here there are things that there's just no way. I mean, and I
Right.
mean, like,
Yeah.
I've lived here 20 years, and you can talk about all kinds of places in Iceland, I just don't have a clue.
Mhm.
And then I get
Yeah.
there and I'm like, oh wow, yeah, this is Reyðarfjörður, I
Yeah.
love it.
No, I get it. Yeah. I find it endearing at one point, and yeah, like you said, very isolating, even when you are technically part of the family or the circle, because you're just like, well, this is my time to just chill and get in
Yeah.
my own thoughts and allow, just like you've developed your own way of coping in essence in order to
Yeah.
not feel like it's that big of a deal, because
Yeah.
it's true, they have their experiences, and it's really fascinating because you find out tidbits about people that you weren't expecting if you are listening to what they're
Mhm.
saying, mainly because you're just like, oh, okay, was it like that, like, and also the jokes. That's
Yeah.
I sometimes tune out the jokes only because they're a bit beyond my humor. I'll just say it like that. They're just like they
Oh
can be
my
a bit
gosh.
crude. And it's
And
just
when I
not my thing.
first came here, oh my gosh, I was just like, did she say that?
Yeah.
Was she? And now, and now I've had to tone it down when I go home.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Me
one woman,
too.
she was like, "You are so crude. People are just they just you gotta tone
Yeah.
it down." And I was just,
Yeah.
"Oh, thought I was being funny.
Yeah, exactly. You're shedding this persona as a person coming from the U.S., which I think is fascinating too, and how
Yeah.
you take on these Icelandic things. Yeah,
Hey,
hilarious.
the weirdest thing is nudity. Okay, if
Mm.
we're gonna go full American here. Yeah, I was not a member of the nudie club, and
Okay,
you
the
know, I'm
nudie club.
very, yeah, I just wasn't, and I had to get used to the, you know, because the pools are a
Hmm.
cultural center here, and I love it. Now I'm at the point where I'm like, you know, at women, anytime I can have an opportunity to get a swimming class going for women of foreign origins, I'm like, let's do it because this is your key, is your key to the hot tub. But you got
Yeah.
to get used to being naked. You're walking around naked. And in the
Mhm.
beginning, I was just shaking. And then I'd taken the
Wow.
job in the preschool. And so I'm starting to get used to it. And I've got my little shower shoes on because my husband said, you got to wear your shower shoes. And I'm all naked and I'm walking. And the first time I'm walking with my tatas out and I can do this. And a kid from the preschool walks up to me. And I just went into, Wah!
Oh no.
I was like, I'm going to jail. She just saw my everything. She knows, you know.
And this
And
is
the
at
little,
in the pool in the dressing room, by the way,
yeah,
to
in
people
the
who are listening.
dressing
It's
room,
not
yeah.
just
And I'm
like
like,
everywhere in the country.
yeah. Well, and because you got to go to the showers, but you got to get
Right.
to the showers from this side. So you've got a good 6 to 10 meter walk, you know, just naked. You just have to learn to like your body or ignore it, one or the other.
Yeah. What
So
is
the little girl and I'm all, oh my God, where's her mom? You know, I'm just all, you know, I'm full on American here. I just flashed a kid. I'm done. And the little girl, little girl looks up at me and she says, I like your shower shoes. And I was
Oh,
like,
that's so cute.
yeah, I was like, okay, okay, I can do this.
I like you have fashionable shower shoes, Nichole.
I did. They had flowers on them.
Ah. Yeah, that is. I definitely. I've had friends come over because I don't know why, but I guess the naked part just hasn't been something that was as big of a deal for me. But I had friends who were coming over, and I was like, okay, when we go to the pool, because this is a quintessential part, so we have to go. You have to
Mhm.
shower naked, or else you'll have Icelanders or these people who live here telling you, hey, you got to
Mhm.
go to the shower and use soap and be naked and whatever else. And they were like, they had their towels on and they put the towels, around themselves and were taking their clothes off and trying to keep their towels on before they would actually
Yeah.
get to the shower. And it was a whole thing. And even when we got back, the same thing. Like they had their towels on as soon as they could get them, and we're trying to get dressed this way, and just were like keeping their head straight, like not looking at
Yeah.
anybody else. And I was like, it's okay, no one cares. But that
Right.
is not, if you're not used to it, it is super hard. And I
Yeah.
just, and witnessing it from the meaning, like being here now and being here for such a while, it's like, wow, is that what it, was I ever like that? Like, I don't remember it being like that, but possibly.
Yeah. That was something that you know, and because I have the fun story, then it's not it's easier to say about it now. But it's just what happens. It's just a part of it. It's getting used to
Yeah, yeah,
it.
definitely. And in regards to as a whole for foreigners in Iceland,
Mhm.
what challenges do you think that they face? Because we've talked specifically about women, but are there any other challenges that maybe foreigners who are thinking about coming to live here or already
Mhm.
do might have in common that they're not aware of?
Mm. Definitely be prepared for the expense. I know you've gone over this on previous podcasts, but because it's you know it's one thing when you first get here and everything and like okay food, but it's just you know the living expense of it.
Mm,
Icelanders, they work hard, and which you know it's not unknown to us Americans. We are pretty hardworking too,
right.
but you work hard and your money maybe doesn't just go so far, and the options for living different types of lifestyles. Icelanders like to
Mm,
live you know a high standard. I mean, and I don't
mm-hmm.
understand. I mean, when the 6 months I spent in California, when I came back, everybody had a Range Rover and a Tesla, and I don't know where they got the money because we're in COVID.
That's what I've been asking. So like I was like, people are not going on vacations, but they're buying new houses and new cars. What am I missing? It's like interest rates are low, and I was like,
Yeah,
but even still, what kind of vacations were you taking? Because I want to go with you
yeah,
on vacation if you got this
that's
type of
right.
money.
That's right. It's just that there is a high standard of living, and you
Yeah.
see it in the way, and be prepared for a little bit of a just for that lack of diversity that you know. I mean, I guess it depends on where you come from.
Yeah.
But you maybe, and it depends, where you settle. If you settle and like us, you hang with the foreigners, then it's fine. But there is a lack of diversity, and I when I go home or when I go to London or whatever, and I see it in the way people dress, the way
Mm.
people speak, the different types of houses that people live in. It's just something that really you should just be aware that there is a lot of sameness here,
Mm.
and that we fall into it. I've found that. I mean, I in many ways dress and behave and do my house more like an Icelander now. Not necessarily just because that's what are options for me, because I can order and buy and do whatever I want, but because that's how it is here. And
Yeah.
and and it's just something. And I mean, I love it when I go home to California and there's carpet on people's floors, or you know and the people have real fireplaces, and they're just there's just a lack in that. There's a lot more now than when I moved here 20 years ago. I mean, when you look
Mm.
at like restaurants and things like that. But just be prepared for a little bit of that lack of diversity if it's something that you love in life.
Yeah, for sure. Or just if you're going to live here, know that you need to go travel to other places, maybe fulfill that part for yourself every once in a while.
Yeah, hang out with
Yeah.
us. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Overall, though, your experience, if you sum it up, has it been positive? Meaning, like, do you see yourself continuously staying in Iceland? What is your kind of take on it at this point in your life?
At this point in my life, it's the best thing I've ever done. Even though there have been, some difficulties, I am just as thankful, if not more thankful, for those.
Mm,
I mean, had I not come here and experienced a little prejudice and worked with people who trusted me for the prejudices they've done, then would, I swear to God, I'm ashamed to say it, but I would just be a privileged white American. I just
mm,
wouldn't. I did not realize how many things I took for granted.
okay.
Um, my experience overall has obviously been good. I am very, very privileged to have been able to do things that I maybe never would have experienced had I not moved here. I
Mhm.
know I just the people and the wealth of things that I've learned from people. My experience is maybe different than others, but I mean, like I said, I live in a culturally diverse neighborhood, and I have two children who are living in a world where they know people from Nepal and
Yeah.
Thailand and Ghana and Korea and
In Iceland.
Iceland.
Yeah, it's intense.
And they they
Awesome.
they know these things, and they don't know prejudice in the
Mm,
sense that they don't know how to do it. They were asked to take part in an interview once, as children, just speaking honestly, and the interviewer had asked them about, and what if someone has a different color of skin or a different color of hair? And I wasn't have anything to do with it. I just sat in another room, and my little daughter, she sat with her little hands in her pocket, and she said, I think that's kind of bad. And if anyone says it's not, then they're bad. And my son was, I'm like, okay. And, uh, and then my son was just like, he kind of looked at the camera like the guy, what's wrong with you? They're just people.
Yeah.
You know?
Aw.
So that's something that, I had to learn. And for them, it was so, it's been a wonderful experience, because that's something that my children and I, that we have, and we can continue to give and to,
Yeah.
so it's been one, I love it. And I all those quirky things that we talked about that, people should, that maybe were difficult to encounter. I love that about Iceland. I
Yeah.
love that they love everything Icelandic, and that they have their own private little club, and I'm working to get in there, and I just love it. And the other thing is, Jesus Christ, we couldn't live in a more beautiful place.
Right. Absolutely.
We
Absolutely.
really couldn't. It is absolutely wonderful here.
It's a
I
privilege
would
for
say
sure.
to everyone, if it were easy to get in, do it. But it's a great place, and I'm just thankful.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're gonna wrap it up with one last question,
Okay.
and that is like the signature question of all things Iceland, which is, What is your favorite Icelandic word or phrase?
My favorite Icelandic word or phrase is both my favorite and my least favorite, and that is "þetta rettast," because Icelanders use it to sort of explain away responsibility and thinking with long-term goals and whatever. They throw caution to the wind, and we're going to go into a recession. "Þetta rettast." So we have
Buy a
lots of
house, buy a
unemployment.
car.
Yeah, but when I put it into my experience and experience of people that I advocate for, and I'm so fortunate enough to know, I look at Thetaret as this sort of, it's going to be okay.
Mhm.
And it's going to be okay because it can be here. I mean, I'm a testament of it. I came here years ago. I had a difficult experience. I was abused in a few different
Mm.
ways when I first came here, and I wasn't told about my rights. And I don't want to get into all the details of it, but it
Yeah.
was a tough knock, and all I could think about was getting out of here.
Yeah.
And but to being 16 years of living here, working a little hard, taking a couple of lumps, to being a parliamentarian,
Yeah.
and having
Amazing.
great friends, knowing people like you, who I'm honored and privileged and embarrassed to hear you say you have some kind of respect or fondness for
What?
me.
Girl.
Yeah, I can't imagine that anyone looks at me and says, "Hey, that girl." No, I just, it's so that the rettest, it's a testament to the fact that it's a wonderful thing. It's one of my favorite and least favorite things. Yeah. And that
Awesome.
makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think it all falls in the cup that that's it. It'll all be work out, meaning you'll all be understood in the end anyway. So it'll be fine.
But
But
I can't let you go without me asking you a question, because
mhm.
this is so important.
Yep.
Have you voted or made a plan to vote?
Absolutely. I've already voted. My ballot has been received. I did it a while ago. Well, as early as I could,
Hmm.
considering timelines and things. And I sent it express mail because I was so afraid that it wouldn't make it. And I'm just, yeah. And I hope that everyone who is from the U.S., by the time this comes out, has voted. I mean, it's, as you're, a U.S. citizen, you have that right, and it is something that we all should exercise,
Yeah.
because this is the future of the country that, even if we don't live there, it's a huge part of our identities, and
Hmm.
I also
Hmm.
just think it's really important, that we help to create the change we want to see. And in this case, there's a whole lot of
Exactly.
change that needs to happen starting on
Yeah.
November 3rd. So,
Exactly. And it's just, this is about democracy. The world is
absolutely,
watching. And
absolutely.
regardless of what the maniac in the White House right now says, I mean, the information that is out there and accessible, the manners by which and the options that everyone has to vote
Hmm.
are, I mean, it's just so important. And the America is important. I don't care what
Yeah,
anyone says, and what
yeah,
we do, the world watches. And if we do this well and we do this right, it will affect the things that we're seeing happening in other places. So
absolutely.
glad you
Yeah,
voted. My vote is counted.
nice.
I'm so happy, and thank you so much for having me. This was
Yeah,
great.
my pleasure. Thank you. And I just want to also say a quick shout out to all the people that have stood in line for many hours just to vote. Whew, I am so thankful and proud of
Yes,
all of you, just for the sheer fact that you're just like, I'm not gonna let anything stop me. That's amazing. Yeah,
I bow down to them.
absolutely. Nichole, it has been an absolute pleasure having you. I am so thankful. I know you're like, how could you look at me like that? But just know that you are an inspiration to so many. And I hope that the people that listen to this take your insights, your experience, and use it to help continue that, for us to have a more integrated and inclusive society, because that's what's really what we're all like working towards
Yeah,
trying to do, right? Is have different
that's right.
voices uplifted and make society better. Why not?
Hmm. That's that's what it's all about. It's about us
Absolutely. Yes.
and
Thank
you
you.
out
And
there.
you, yeah, and you out there, and all of us right here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.